As a die-hard fan of the Resident Evil franchise, every new release is always an exciting prospect for me. As for Resident Evil 9, which is scheduled for a February 2026 release, the trailer couldn't have been more tantalizing. There were already rumors doing the rounds that this one could be one of the most realistic games in the franchise, and from the looks of the trailer, I think it is quite likely. The entire license is actually based on an imaginary story, which means that the developers can add a touch of realism, and this is Capcom going back to their roots, reimagining what survival horror means in 2026, and doing something we haven't seen from this franchise in a very long time. In this video, I have captured some of the shocking things that we have learned so far about Resident Evil Road to Requiem, which is going to be the next big thing in the video game industry. The new protagonist, Grace Ashcroft's traumatic journey. Let me start with the biggest reveal. Resident Evil 9 isn't following Leon Kennedy or any legacy character. Instead, we're playing as Grace Ashcroft, an FBI analyst who's absolutely terrified of what she's walking into. And that's the whole point. Grace isn't a hardened agent with nerves of steel. She's a technical analyst pulled from her desk, armed with intelligence but not combat training, and thrown directly into a nightmare scenario. The genius here is that Grace transforms throughout the game from a fearful investigator genuinely petrified of what's happening around her into a determined survivor forced to confront horrors that no amount of FBI training could prepare her for. We see her shaking, we hear her voice trembling in the trailers, and that vulnerability is absolutely intentional. Capcom's director, Koshi Nakanishi, actually mentioned that Leon Kennedy is actually quite a bad match for horror because he's too composed. Grace is the opposite. She embodies the pure human terror that the series lost somewhere along the way. The legacy of Alyssa Ashcroft. If you thought Grace is some random character, think again. She's the daughter of Alyssa Ashcroft, a character from Resident Evil Outbreak, a game from 2004 that most casual fans probably never played. Alyssa was a journalist investigating Umbrella's shady dealings, and she was murdered 8 years before the events of Requiem. The trailer opens with a devastating line, "Alyssa died 8 years ago. Perhaps it's time for you to face the past." Grace is being sent to investigate the Wrenwood Hotel, the exact location where her mother was killed. This isn't just a plot device. This entire game is built on Grace confronting her mother's legacy and uncovering what really happened to her. The emotional weight here is massive because it means Grace has spent her entire adult life in the shadow of that trauma, and now she's forced to walk the same halls where her mother died. The psychological survival horror shift. Capcom has made a deliberate decision with Requiem, and it's a refreshing one. This game is prioritizing psychological horror and emotional tension over raw combat prowess. Instead of feeling like an action game with horror elements, Requiem is going back to the survival horror roots of the original games. The emphasis is on unpredictable enemy behavior, the terror of the unknown, and what Capcom calls addictive fear. This means you're going to experience genuine dread as you explore, not just adrenaline from firefights. The game forces you to manage resources, solve puzzles, and think your way through problems rather than blast through them. It's a deliberate departure from the action-heavy Resident Evil 4 and 5 era, and fans have been begging for this shift. Reworked classic zombies with advanced AI. The basic zombies aren't just shambling corpses anymore. Capcom has completely reimagined how zombie AI works in Requiem. These creatures are unpredictable. You can't just memorize their patterns and exploit them. The AI adapts to how you play, learns your patterns, and will surprise you even if you've encountered the same enemy type 100 times. This means that zombie encounters remain tense throughout the entire game. There's no point where they become background cannon fodder because the enemy is constantly evolving its approach to hunting you. It's a psychological warfare upgrade to one of gaming's most iconic creatures. Stalker-type enemies return with new mechanics. Speaking of enemies, the stalker enemy type that haunted us with Mr. X and Lady Dimitrescu is back, and it's absolutely nightmarish. The creature hunting Grace is a horrifying amalgamation of human and experimental subject. A pale, blonde-haired creature with bulging blind eyes, goat-like legs, and a tattered medical gown. This thing can burrow through ceilings, crash through walls, and most terrifyingly, it can remain completely silent while stalking you. But here's the innovation. This creature has specific weaknesses based on its biology. Bright light causes its experimental skin to burn, forcing it to retreat. Loud noises attract it. The game is building a logic-based approach to enemy encounters. Rather than just relying on combat, it means players need to adapt their playstyle and think strategically about how to avoid this thing, which creates this incredible tension that pure combat never could. Generational drama and family secrets. This game is leaning hard into the idea that family trauma is just as horrifying as any BOW. The entire narrative is structured around suppressed memories, family legacies, and secrets that have been buried for years. Grace's story is more than surviving a zombie outbreak. It's about uncovering why her mother died, what secrets her family holds, and how those secrets connect to everything happening around her. The puzzles themselves seem to be tied to this family history, with players needing to understand Grace's past to progress. It's a narrative depth that the series hasn't really explored at this level before. Wrenwood Hotel as central setting. The Wrenwood Hotel is the epicenter of multiple mysteries. It's a crime scene where Alyssa was murdered 8 years ago, but it's also potentially a key to understanding broader Umbrella conspiracies. The hotel serves as both a literal haunted location, physically decrepit and filled with horrific secrets, and a metaphorical heart of the story. Every room, every hallway, every corner of this hotel holds pieces of a puzzle that Grace needs to solve. It's essentially a modern reimagining of the Spencer Mansion or the RPD Station, a location so dense with lore and secrets that it becomes a character in itself. Shifting gameplay perspectives with dynamic design. Capcom made an interesting choice. Requiem will let you seamlessly switch between first-person and third-person perspectives. But here's what makes this actually genius instead of gimmicky. Each perspective has unique horror sequences tailored specifically to it. First person creates claustrophobic, oppressive dread. You're trapped in narrow corridors with limited peripheral vision. Third person shows Grace's more vulnerable animations, her clumsiness, her constant shaking, which emphasizes her as a scared human rather than a powerful protagonist. The game actually encourages you to switch between them because different situations demand different perspectives for maximum psychological impact. Single-player, story-focused experience. Capcom spent time experimenting with online multiplayer and open-world concepts for Resident Evil. They decided against it. Requiem is deliberately single-player, story-driven, and designed to be a deeply personal horror experience. This was a conscious rejection of the multiplayer experiments that RE did with Outbreak and the action-adventure direction that sometimes diluted the series' horror core. It's Capcom saying they heard the fans asking for survival horror, and that they're delivering exactly that. Bloodlines, experiments, and Grace's DNA. There's something special about Grace's blood. Early trailers hint that Umbrella, or whatever remains of them, has a specific interest in Grace's genetic makeup. One of the most intriguing details from the trailers is a container marked with the Umbrella logo, suggesting Grace's blood might have unique properties. Theories suggest that Alyssa may have had modified DNA from Umbrella experiments, and Grace, being her daughter, inherited something extraordinary. This could mean Grace's blood is either a weapon, a cure, or something far more complex. The idea that your protagonist is literally hunted because of what runs through her veins is a brilliant horror concept. Umbrella Corporation's shadow. Even though Umbrella was supposedly destroyed, its shadow still looms over everything in Requiem. The corporation's legacy of experimentation, corporate cover-ups, and relentless pursuit of biological weapons research continues to fuel the plot. Grace's investigation is about uncovering how Umbrella's experiments never actually stopped, how the corporation's files and research are still being used by dangerous people, and how old experiments continue to have ripple effects across the present day. FBI and government secrets. Grace is an FBI analyst, which means she has access to intelligence and governmental frameworks. But the trailers hint that Grace's investigation might be manipulated by people within the government itself. There's a suggestion that elements of the US government were involved in covering up what happened at Raccoon City, and they might have a vested interest in what happens at the Wrenwood Hotel. The conspiracy goes deeper than just Umbrella. Government corruption and secret experiments are part of the broader mystery. Bombs and Easter eggs. Capcom has explicitly stated that Requiem is packed with callbacks to earlier games, hidden references to iconic locations, and nods to legacy characters. We're talking possible references to Raccoon City landmarks, connections to Leon and Claire's stories, callbacks to the original mansion, and Easter eggs that will make longtime fans go absolutely wild. The developer message mentioned that even though this is the 30th anniversary celebration, it's not entirely backward-looking, but the amount of fan service is definitely there for those who know where to look. Playable flashbacks and reliving Alyssa's story. Insider leaks suggest that players won't just hear about Alyssa's death. They'll potentially play through flashback sequences as Alyssa herself. Imagine controlling Grace's mother as she investigates the Wrenwood Hotel years ago, watching as events unfold that will haunt her daughter forever. This mechanic adds incredible emotional depth because you're literally walking in your mother's footsteps, seeing the horror she experienced, and understanding her final moments. It transforms the story from a mystery into a tragic family saga. Drastic difficulty and tension curve. Capcom is making bold promises about the difficulty and pacing of Requiem. The game intentionally maintains a high level of tension and vulnerability throughout the early hours. Grace starts out almost defenseless, genuinely terrified, and struggling against enemies. But gradually, through encountering these horrors and gaining experience, she becomes stronger. It's a carefully managed curve that forces players to feel genuinely vulnerable at the start before gradually building competence. This is the opposite of power fantasy games. It's designed to make you uncomfortable on purpose. Boss battles and combat evolution. When boss battles come, they're designed to test your wits rather than your shooting accuracy. The game's director specifically said the approach is more like the original Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2, where you expand your exploration area in a closed space and overcome obstacles using clever thinking. By the time players reach major boss encounters, they'll have access to weapon diversity and tactical options, but the emphasis is on strategy and environmental awareness rather than reflexes. Combat feels earned and meaningful rather than constant and exhausting. Art, visual symbolism, and lighting. The visual design of Requiem is doing some heavy psychological lifting. Capcom is using advanced lighting techniques, visual symbolism, and the RE Engine's Strand technology for incredibly detailed environments and character animations. Lighting looks absolutely terrifying. Darkness becomes oppressive. Light becomes something to chase. Shadows hide impossible horrors. The art design is specifically crafted to manipulate your psychological state and push you toward fear rather than comfort. Editions, merchandise, and special content. Capcom is releasing multiple editions of Requiem. There's the standard edition at $69.99, the deluxe edition at $79.99, which includes a steelbook case, lenticular card, 5 costumes, including a Lady Dimitrescu skin that turns Grace into RE Village's most meme-worthy villain, weapon skins, charms, and an audio pack with classic Raccoon City music. There's also merchandise like a special Resident Evil Requiem Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller and Grace Ashcroft amiibo figures. Capcom is treating this like a cultural event, not just a game release. fan theories about secret cities and mysteries. The community is theorizing about hidden cities within Raccoon City's blast zone, new outbreak locations beyond the Wrenwood Hotel, and the possibility that other legacy characters might make unexpected appearances. Fans are speculating about what happens to characters from earlier games, whether certain RE Outbreak survivors make a return, and how the story connects to the broader franchise mythology. There's genuine mystery here that Capcom hasn't fully answered. Release date and franchise anniversary alignment. Resident Evil Requiem launches on February 27, 2026. That timing is deliberate. The original Resident Evil came out on March 22, 1996, making 2026 the franchise's 30th anniversary year. Capcom's release timing means Requiem essentially opens the celebration of 3 decades of survival horror. It's not coincidental that the game that's supposed to return the franchise to its horror roots is launching during the anniversary year. It's symbolic and meaningful. Multiple playable characters beyond Grace. We know Grace is the primary protagonist, but leaks suggest there are at least 2 other playable characters in the game. Leon Kennedy is heavily rumored to make a return as a playable character, which would explain some of the fan service and callbacks. There's also speculation that players will control Alyssa in flashback sequences. This gives the story multiple perspectives and makes Requiem feel like an ensemble narrative rather than a single character journey. Canceled multiplayer and open world concepts. Capcom revealed they experimented with online multiplayer modes and open-world Resident Evil concepts during development. They decided against both. These weren't secret ideas. Capcom openly discussed abandoning these concepts because they didn't align with what fans wanted or what the horror genre needed. This shows incredible restraint and a willingness to listen to fan feedback rather than chasing trends. Cutting room rumors and DLC potential. Some early development content was apparently cut from the main game. There are rumors about scrapped locations, alternate story paths, and mechanics that didn't make the final cut. This suggests that Capcom might have extensive DLC plans post-launch, potentially featuring these cut locations and mechanics as additional story content or side scenarios. Given how successful RE4 Remake's DLC was, expect this game to have similar post-launch support. Locations beyond Wrenwood Hotel. While Wrenwood Hotel is central to the story, it's not the only location. The game also features Rhodes Hill Chronic Care Facility in Raccoon City, which appears to be where Grace gets captured and imprisoned early in the story. The trailers also show various other locations throughout the ruins of Raccoon City, suggesting a broader scope than initially assumed. The game isn't confined to a single location like some survival horror games. Official ratings, length, and accessibility. Resident Evil Requiem has received an R18+ rating in Australia and an M rating from the ESRB, citing high-impact violence, gore, and intense horror sequences. In terms of length, the game is expected to be comparable to the Resident Evil 4 remake, which means somewhere in the 12 to 17-hour range for a first playthrough. As for accessibility, Capcom has included new accessibility features for both controls and horror effect intensity. This means players who want to experience the story but need modified difficulty options or reduced horror intensity can customize their experience without feeling like they're getting a watered-down version. Marvelous verdict, a game worth being excited for. Look, when you step back and look at all these details together, it becomes clear that Capcom means business and the company intends to redefine horror one more time. Grace Ashcroft's story, her personal connection to the mystery, the emphasis on psychological horror over action, the returning to series roots, the multiple playable characters, the deep lore connections, and the intentional design decisions all point to a game that's been carefully crafted with respect for the franchise's legacy while pushing the genre forward. This feels like Capcom's answer to fans who've been saying, "We want the horror back." Resident Evil Requiem launches February 27th, 2026, and based on everything we've learned from the Road to Requiem trailer, this is going to be one of the defining horror experiences of the generation. I genuinely cannot wait to experience what Capcom has created here. Do let me know in the comments below what you think of this intriguing trailer and share your expectations from the upcoming game as a gamer.